Hello and welcome to another episode of India and Global Left. If you are new to the show, please hit that subscribe button. Also consider becoming a YouTube member, a Patreon, or donate a small amount, giving in the link in the description box. Without further ado, let me welcome our guest tonight, Professor Mohammad Marandi. Professor Marandi teaches at University of Tehran in Iran. Professor Marandi, welcome back to India and Global Left.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's always a pleasure.
I want to start with your first impression on the 2 week ceasefire between Iran and the United States. What is the significance of this moment, particularly for Iranians?
It's clearly a major achievement for the Iranians and the axis of resistance. The fact that Trump, who initially spoke of capitulation and that unconditional surrender was, I think, one of the first things that he said after the war, or at least posted, if I'm not mistaken. He said that, I think, for both wars, the 12-day war and this war. And then he had to retreat, and ultimately he gave his 15-point plan, which Iran rejected. And the fact that he had to accept Iran's framework, Iran's 10-point plan, as the framework for negotiations, I think that is a huge achievement. And it is a failure of the empire. It's a sign of failure. That doesn't mean the war is over. And the Iranians are prepared for a restart of the war. But it will be very difficult for Trump to restart this war at this stage. And he has not been able to carry out an operation to steal Iran's enriched uranium, which Iran has every right to have in accordance with international law. And in addition to that, he has not been able to take a single square meter of Iranian territory. Iran is in full control of the Strait of Hormuz, and people across the country in Iran have been on the streets rallying in support of the government, the state, the leaders, the armed forces. And the axis of resistance across the region have been active in hammering their adversaries. So after 40 days, we've seen that they've failed in stopping Iran's missiles and drones. They've also been forced to concede that their operation to take the uranium has ended with failure. So none of their operations have succeeded. Even their so-called air superiority is unassured. Iran can dictate terms to the ships in the Persian Gulf region, and these Arab family dictatorships have paid a heavy price for their complicity in murdering so many Iranians. So I think it is a major failure. Doesn't mean, again, that this war is over. It doesn't mean that the 10-point plan of Iran is going to be accepted by the United States. But this is a major step in the right direction.
I've been reading about people celebrating in Tehran and in Baghdad. This has come after 40 days of tremendous sacrifice on part of Iranians and other allies in the region. If you could tell us a little bit about the mood in Iran.
Well, again, we're cautiously optimistic because all of our allies are a part of the ceasefire. That means Lebanon, and the Israeli regime continues to murder Lebanese citizens, and that basically means that Netanyahu and the Zionists don't want the normalization of trade in the Persian Gulf. They don't want oil and LNG and fertilizers to be exported. They are trying to ruin the potential for peace in the region as we speak. So we have to be cautious about the days ahead. Iran will not accept the regime murdering its friends and allies and citizens in Palestine or in Lebanon. But obviously, there are celebrations because Trump was forced to make a major shift in policy. And the Iraqis have made enormous sacrifices during the past 40 days in liberating their country from occupation and have achieved significant success. The Iranians, too, under constant airstrikes and murderous carpet bombing. The people of Lebanon have achieved a great deal through their resilience and power, and they've shown that Hezbollah has not been diminished and it has not been a weakened force, as we've discussed on your show more than once. I've said this on a number of occasions on your show, that those who are saying that Hezbollah has been weakened and is no longer a potent force, today Hezbollah is stronger than it's ever been before. It has shown the Israeli regime its strength, and it has shown the world its principled position in support of the Palestinian people and in its attempt to bring about an end to the genocide in Gaza. So there is cause for celebration, but that doesn't mean, again, that this is over. We could have a renewal of hostilities tomorrow. It could be in a week from now. It could be 2 weeks from now. It could be a month from now. We are cautious. But the fact that Trump was forced to make this shift at a time when Iran controlled everything that it controlled 40 days ago is enormous.
One Israeli press has reported that Netanyahu was not consulted before Trump administration took this decision of opening this window of talks for 2 weeks in Islamabad in Pakistan. What is your sense of that report? And Israel has also said that while it would abide by the ceasefire in general, it would not abide by any such conditions on Lebanon. Your response to these two reports?
The Israeli regime will have to abide by the ceasefire in Lebanon. That's a part of the ceasefire, and it will not be allowed to do otherwise. Otherwise, Iran will make sure that the regime is punished. So that will not last. That will not be tolerated by any means. But whether Netanyahu was consulted or not, it's not really clear to me. Obviously, Zionists, many of them, I'm sure, were consulted because Trump has surrounded himself with Israeli first service. So there's no doubt that they were deeply involved in the debates going on in the United States. But I think there are a couple of things that we have to keep in mind. One is that the Israeli regime is now loathed across the world. And even in the West, many people loathe the regime. Also, the United States has brought about a global economic crisis, and it will not remain untouched. It will affect it too. And I think that many in the United States and in the capital, at the end of the day, will prioritize their own fate over the demands of the likes of Netanyahu. That doesn't mean that the Zionist regime does not have huge influence. It has huge influence. Washington has been captured by the Zionist lobby and by the Israeli regime supporters. We know that from, well, we've always been saying that, but we know that also from Joe Kent's resignation letter. He was a very high-ranking intelligence officer appointed by Trump himself, and he made that very clear admission. So they have huge influence, but at the end of the day, what Iran has been able to do to U.S. standing and in the world is huge, and the Americans recognize that. The Americans needed this halt in hostilities. So perhaps one could say that the Zionist lobby in the United States did not have the upper hand in the decision-making process in the United States on this occasion, but that doesn't mean that it will remain this way. And that's why the Iranians are very cautious, because there's no doubt that the Israeli regime and the Zionists do not want this situation to continue. They will do anything that they can to disrupt the halt in hostilities. They will do anything they can to continue to force the global economy to continue to suffer.
Let me come to the negotiations due from Friday onwards. Before I ask you a few questions on some of the clauses that are being reported now, a general point of discussion has been that after what has happened in the last 40 days, the atmosphere in the room, comprising of Iranian and US officials, would be completely different. That's what many analysts are saying, given what Iran has demonstrated and given the loss it has taken, they would be much tougher. If you could comment on your sense of what would be there in the minds of the Iranian officials going into these negotiations.
Well, first of all, we have not had direct negotiations with Americans. That there should be no ambiguity there. These were all messages that were sent back and forth. And ultimately, we achieved a great victory through those, through the resilience of the Iranian people, the resilience of the Iranian armed forces, and the resilience of the axis of resistance. Hezbollah played a very important role. The resistance in Iraq played a very important role, and the resistance in Yemen also played a very important role. But of course, the fact that people on the streets, whether in Iran or in Iraq or in Yemen, and of course in Lebanon, they were constantly being bombed, but they too were resilient. The people themselves were the ultimate force behind this victory, the resilience of the people, the resistance of the people, the principled stance of the people. And remember, we all are paying this price simply because we're opposed to genocide. The Palestinian people are suffering, they're being massacred, they're going through 2.5 years of genocide, and our guilt, our punishment is that we oppose this. But the Iranian armed forces played an enormous role. For 40 days. They hammered the Israeli regime day and night. They hammered U.S. forces day and night. They hammered assets affiliated to the United States in the Persian Gulf region day and night. It was unrelenting. And as I said, the Americans failed to take control of the Strait of Hormuz or to carry out an operation to steal Iran's enriched uranium. So they underestimated the Iranian people. They underestimated the Iranian armed forces. They underestimated the axis of resistance. And now I think they are just beginning to appreciate that the world has changed. And I think that the entire global majority and even people in the West should be celebrating this victory. Iran was fighting, and the axis of resistance has been fighting for humanity. They've been fighting for everyone. And the fight to prevent the extermination of the Palestinian people is a global fight.
On the clauses of the talks, I wanted to ask you particularly about a couple, but let's begin by the clause about ending of all bases in the region. How likely, how practical does it sound to you? And do you think Iran would be willing to compromise on that particular clause?
I think that no one is naive in Tehran about what the United States plans to do or is willing to do. But Iran will not accept a peace agreement ultimately, unless these conditions are met. So our relationship with the United States has been what it is for the last 47 years. And we've been punished and attacked and for simply be anti-imperialism across the region. Whether it was the Soviet Union, we were opposed to their occupation of Afghanistan, but we're also opposed to U.S. supporting terrorism and extremism in Afghanistan. We supported the people of Cuba, and we continue to do so, the people of Venezuela, the people of South Africa during apartheid, and of course the people of Palestine and so on. So that is our sin. We don't expect the United States to suddenly support the people across the global South. But this is a turning point. The United States messed around with the wrong country, and it failed. So whether we come to an agreement with the United States and they accept our terms or not, the important point right now is that the United States has been forced to put aside its proposals and accept our proposal as a framework. Again, we're not pretending that tomorrow Trump is going to say, yes, we accept everything that the Iranians said and we accept their demands. But this shift is huge, and the fact that the world has seen the extraordinary resilience of the Iranian people, and Iraq, Yemen, which the world views the status quo. That, I think, is in itself. So, yes, all 10 points are, of course, points that will not make the United States happy. And some of them you would argue with me that they will never accept under current circumstances. But neither will Iran accept any of them to be put aside. So we'll have to see how things play out. But I think what has happened is that there has been a sea change. And the United States, Iran will no longer allow the United States to play the role that it did in the Persian Gulf. It will no longer allow Qatar and the Emirates and the Saudis and Kuwait and Bahrain to behave as proxies for empire and to be platforms for bombing Yemen, which they were, for invading Iraq as they were in 2003, slaughtering Iranians. These countries have to behave like normal countries, like countries across the world. They can no longer have imperial ambitions with their tiny size. That's not going to be accepted anymore. And now they're going to be forced to accept this because Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz and their overlord failed to defeat Iran.
What do you make about the clause about sanctions? There are some analysts who are saying that the sanctions are increasingly less relevant for Iran. One of the things said is about its trade and other kinds of relationship of exchange with China. There are reports that trade between the two countries have not gone down, in fact has gone up during the last 40 days, and there has been a reasonable balance of payments given Iran export the energy in exchange of industrial and other equipments, plants, and other important industrial components from China.
Somewhat ironic, isn't it?
Yes. So how important are lifting of sanctions for Iran? And do you think they will lift the sanctions?
Well, again, this goes back to the response to my previous question. I'm not saying, and Iranians are not naive about the United States, and the expectation is not that Trump will announce that he accepts these demands, but these are all reasonable demands. all the 10 demands, these are not demands. These are not outrageous demands. These are reasonable demands. The problem is that the world is so used to the United States being dominating other countries and bullying other countries that for them to see Iran making reasonable demands looks unreasonable, because all other countries are forced to make unreasonable concessions to the United States, and Iran is the only country, literally, except for Russia and China, that refuses to do so. But Iran is a smaller country, so it is shocking to everyone. These are not unreasonable demands. But regardless of where the negotiations go, the sanctions regime is collapsing. And this war is a big step in the further collapse. And this enhances India's trading position, or in India's position at the negotiating table with the United States over tariffs. The United States can no longer bully any country the way it could before after what has happened during these 40 days. So people in India should rejoice. The Israelis and the Americans have created a crisis for the Indian economy, no doubt, with their reckless and brutal and ruthless behavior. And they showed that they don't care about the Indian people or anyone else. But now ordinary Indians, governments, the government of India, governments across the world can assert themselves more easily at the negotiating table and defend their rights more effectively because they've seen what Iran has done.
There was a window in which India started to import a lot of energy resources from Iran before the secondary sanctions were tightened, and that became a trickle. That might be restarted, and that would be a huge boost for the Indian economy as much as for Iran. I wanted to just ask you about my two final questions. I think one of the demands in the negotiation table that the Iranians would and should be absolutely hell bent on would be its grip on the Strait of Hormuz. Chas Freeman spoke on the show about the importance of Iran establishing its hold in the Indian Ocean once again after centuries, and that was one critical point that gave Iran a lot of leverage during the war. My own sense is that the Iranian officials would be absolutely rigid about collecting the tolls as a way of reparation or rebuilding post-construction. Your sense of what would be there in the minds of the Iranian negotiators?
No, without a doubt that the Iranians are not going to return to the old status quo. That's finished. And we're already seeing that in the Strait of Hormuz, and we'll continue to see that in the Strait of Hormuz. And the Pakistani government's good offices has provided an opportunity for the decreasing of tensions, and hopefully oil will flow despite the Israeli regime's attempt to disrupt the negotiations and to disrupt the ceasefire. If they continue to do so, obviously, oil won't flow. And the world should put pressure on the Israeli regime to bring an end to the slaughter of Palestinians and Lebanese citizens. But Iran will continue to use its authority and its power to maintain control of over the Strait of Hormuz. And Iran wants it to be a strait where people can use it for business and trade, but where it can no longer be used to conspire against the people of the region by despots who are bound to Washington. That is no longer going to be acceptable. So Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz is not going to limit trade. It's going to limit the empire from creating further disruption in the future. And that, I think, is clear for everyone as being beneficial to the international community.
My final question, Professor Marandi. We discussed with Professor Prabhat Patnaik on one of our shows about the significance of the Iranian resistance against the US-led imperial war. And Professor Patnaik said that Iran's struggle is the struggle of entire global South. I'm kind of paraphrasing, but that was the crux of the conversation. Given the United States self-defined objectives, I mean, they didn't lay out the objectives in a single day, but they did talk about ending Iranian ballistic missile program, ending Iranian allies in the region, of course, quote unquote, regime change. We can keep on adding clauses on that as objectives of the United States, but all of them failed. And this is probably a rare moment in history of imperialism when a hegemonic power has been pushed back by global South countries within such a short period of time. Given the long history of imperialism in our region, I wanted to ask you this broad question about what does this moment represent for the global South as a collective?
Well, you put it better than I could. Your explanation was much more eloquent than anything I could say. I think this is a turning point for the global South. I think this is a defining moment, maybe the most important moment of shift with regards to Western hegemony since the Second World War, even more important than the war in Vietnam. The United States being the global hegemon, the hyperpower, which became the global hegemon that was brutally destroying country after country, finally hit a brick wall. And why did this war happen? Because Iran was independent and opposed genocide. And that is something that people across the global South can feel. They can feel sympathy for. They can understand that to be reasonable. You oppose genocide. You oppose the strangulation of the people of Cuba. You oppose imposing misery upon people in Venezuela. And you're punished for it. I think people all feel that Iran's position was a just position and continues to be a just position. And the United States tried to destroy Iran for taking that position. And Iran's victory, and this was not I think you made a very important point, that this was a short war. It's not over necessarily. We may go back to war, but this was short. The Americans failed to occupy the country. This is no Iraq. This is no Afghanistan where they occupied the country for decades. They failed to take a single square meter of the country. And that, I think, is a huge achievement for Iran and for the global South. And Iran did it on its own. It had friends, but it was on its own. And against this huge coalition, regional and international. So I think it strengthens the hand of Pakistan. It strengthens the hand of India. It strengthens the hand of Bangladesh. It strengthens the hand of everyone who is under pressure from the United States to give concessions to the emperor, to the empire. Now, all of these countries can say, we have rights. Our relationship must be balanced. You must treat us with respect. And the Iranians have paved, and the axis of resistance have paved the way for that.
And I must add that along with this consciousness in the global South, there has been also growing consciousness about the insidious nature of U.S. empire within the heartland of the imperial core, and that's probably one reason. I mean, in one ways, it resembles what was happening during the period of the First World War, when there was tremendous resistance to the traditional type of colonialism. Of course, it gave way to the new kind of imperialism under the U.S. leadership. But this is this moment where a significant chunk of people within the imperial core have been able to see through the nakedness of Western empire. And that's probably why we are seeing a lot of madness in the mainstream media. And I expect people like you to face more madness and pushbacks, etc., from mainstream media. Your closing comment.
Yes, and I agree. And I think that, what a couple of things come to mind. That it's not just Trump. And what you're saying implies that it's much bigger than Trump. And you're absolutely correct. When Trump was speaking about obliterating Iran, taking Iran back to the Stone Age, and destroying a civilization, he's been saying that for weeks now. He began with obliteration. They're all the same. Did you see Trump's opponents in Western media oppose him? Did you see any outrage in The Guardian? Did you see any outrage in the New York Times and MSNBC? They hate Trump. They oppose his policies. But did they say these are outrageous comments? Do we see the fake human rights activists in the West pulling their hair and in rage about such threats to carry out the greatest Holocaust in human history? No. So this shows that the entire Western political establishment is utterly corrupt. And that political establishment includes the mainstream media. This is indeed the Epstein class that's in control. And it didn't have to be this way. There were two very high-ranked American officials who wrote a book on Iran. They both worked in the White House, Flint and Hillary Leverett. Flint Leverett was the head of the Middle East in the National Security Council under Condoleezza Rice, of all people. And then he resigned over the Iraq War. So he was a principled person. His wife, Hillary, she was head of the Persian Gulf. They met each other, I think, in the White House. And when they left, they wrote a book on Iran called Going to Tehran. And it's a very good book. I think everyone should read it. If American analysts had read this book and instead of attacking these two people, because the Democrats and the Republicans and the pundits and the think tankers, they all hammered them for saying that we should understand Iran. And in the book, they deal with many of the myths of Iran, and they explain what should be done. If the Americans, instead of listening to the Zionists, who do nothing but damage, if they had listened to these two people, we would not be in this situation that we are in today. It's a good book. I think people should read it.
Part of the reason of the lack of response to these comments like ending civilization overnight is, of course, there's complicity and corruptness, as you said. But I also feel part of it is about their ignorance or about the notion of civilization in our part of the world. Because for a lot of people in the West, civilization represents real estate buildings or at best like railroads and roads maybe. But for us, civilization is much deeper. It's ingrained in our food, in our culture, in the manner of our rituals, maybe even religion. And I'm emphasizing this as a leftist. The stories that are there in folk songs. I mean, I can go on about it for an hour. But the very idea of what represents a civilization, why it cannot be bombed and wiped off, it has been built through the powerful force of time by over thousands of years. I don't think a lot of people in the West can understand the depth of what civilization means.
I agree, especially the United States, which has a very short past, and it came about by destroying the people who owned the land. But I think that people are beginning to learn more about Iran. They're more interested in Iran. They're interested in figuring out what is it about Iran that has made it so resilient, and Hezbollah, the axis of resistance. There's a lot of interest now. And I'm sure the Zionists are very unhappy about that, and they are busy writing more books and producing more propaganda. But the eyes of people are opening.
We'll leave it there, Professor Marandi. Thank you for your time as always, and stay safe.
Thank you very much for having me.
Hi, my name is Ayushman. I, along with Jyotisman, have started this platform. In the last 2 years, we have tried to build content for the left and progressive forces. We have interviewed economists, historians, political commentators, and activists so far. If you have liked our content so far and want us to build an archive for the left, I have two requests for you. Please do consider donating for the cause. Link is in the description below. Also, if you are not able to do so, don't feel sad. You can always like our videos and share our videos to your comrades. Finally, don't forget to hit the subscribe button.